Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm dear darling. I shall we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhallow today, where that was super loud, so I apologise for how loud everything was there. Late night episode, did a bit of D&D today. It was a pretty decent session. I guess it was mostly kind of like set up, I think, in this session. But amusingly enough that both the campaigns, if you don't know, I'm running 2 campaigns, and they both take place in the same world around basically the same time. Have sort of started to overlap a little bit now. But anyway, good evening everyone. Right, I'm here with a late night broadcast. I hope I can make it through this. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 12 AM on Tuesday, September 24th, 2024. Well, it would have been Monday, the 3rd of September 2024, but still. Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, because I was like, okay, what would be the easiest thing for me to do if I'm running 2 different sessions is just basically give the exact same lore to both of them, just give them different problems to solve in it. And I was like, okay, that seems like the best thing to do. But of course, one caveat is at some point they can start to overlap, which, you know, is intended. I think it would be cool if they meet up at some point, but I'm not exactly sure when things are necessarily going to occur. But this is the first instance of things like being reused between the 2, or properly being reused between the 2 campaigns, because they're going to the same locations. In fact, right now they are both kind of in the same area. Just it's a bit difficult because they're like offset with it with regards to in-game time as well, which makes it a little bit more challenging, but still. I think it's a very interesting concept though, because one of the groups is kind of like in the past compared to the other group, but theoretically, if we take the future groups, what the future group did that day, it's very possible that they were actually almost like in adjacent rooms or very close to each other during it. They might have passed right by it and never knew. Obviously, a lot, you know, being the purveyor of fate, being the GM, I get to control exactly who, what, when, and where they see each other. But still, it's a very much amusing thing, I think, of like, oh, you know, multiple worlds sort of colliding. Now might be how I put it, where the overlap, there is a distinct possibility for overlap for things to occur. It's a very interesting concept, I think, of like games and the simultaneous events that may or may not be happening within them, because I find that very cool. I mean it's always things of stories where you have like not branching paths, but you have different perspectives all at the same time, which are happening simultaneously, and it's cool to see, if possible, how one thing affects the other. Of course, that's something you normally, like I'm thinking like a video game or like a non-linear story, like a movie or whatever. That's something you can plot out in advance. That's something which has fixed story beats. So I think it's a little bit ambitious, shall we say, to properly try to execute it, to try and properly execute it with regards to D&D and the sort of freedom which comes there with it. I don't mean that in a bad way, just sort of like it's, you know, it's unreasonable to expect there'll be any sort of meaningful use of this overlap, apart from, you know, maybe they'll be meeting up here and there, which still is very cool, and I don't think that should be like, oh yeah, that's not a cool thing. Yeah, so I'm trying to think of stories which do that, you know, which have this sort of like non-linearity. Sorry, I just haven't got email. Non-linearity to it, which still makes it engaging and interesting. The first one which came to mind is like Last of Us 2 does it, right? I've not actually played Last of Us 2, but you go through the story from like Ellie's perspective, and then you go back in time to do it through Abby's perspective. And, you know, some people might not like Last of Us 2. I've not played it, so I don't know, but I at least like that in concept, and I don't have anything against the characters in that game. If you don't know why Last of Us 2 ends up being rather controversial, is they did a pretty controversial character move towards the beginning or near the start, I think, of it, which I don't know necessarily if I agree or disagree with the thing, because again, I don't really remember a lot of the things. I can understand the reasons on both sides of the argument. Nonetheless, I suppose you can't argue that it's something which stuck in people's mind. But I definitely don't have enough investment to be like, I hate or love this game, especially without playing it. But I will say it just seems like a cool concept of this non-linear storytelling. You know what game that also came to mind, which I remember did it? It's a game called Heavy Rain, or most sort of like Quantic Dream David Cage games sort of do it, but Heavy Rain comes to mind because it's one where I actually can remember reasonably well what the plot for it is. It's, I would say, interesting. How the plot sort of comes to be, but I don't know, am I that scared of giving spoilers for like a supremely old game? I guess not. That's just kind of like, if it bothers you, then so be it, that's fair. But it's basically, in Heavy Rain you follow like four different perspectives and different opportunities to kind of like see what's going on, see what's happening throughout the game. And one of the things that ends up happening is you like see the story from like the main character's perspective, but then you also might switch to a different character's perspective who's doing like a similar or the same thing somewhere else. And it's like, oh, fascinating, that's interesting. That's an interesting way to do it. But one of the biggest points about this game is it's very interesting, shall we say, plot choice. Is that the best way to put it? Of who ended up being actually like the perpetrator in the end. Because as it turns out, one of the characters you end up playing is the character who was basically going around doing all these bad things, the cause of a lot of the problems throughout the game. Is that a good decision or a bad decision? Who can really say for certain? But it's certainly an interesting decision, shall we say, where the character ends up being like, I don't think I'd say it non-spoilery, but I guess there's no way about it. The character you play as, who is the detective, and ends up being, so major Heavy Rain spoilers, ends up being basically the murderer behind everyone, behind the kidnappings and behind these trials, which I would say in concept, hey, wow, that sounds like really, really cool, doesn't it? That sounds like a really interesting way to go about things. That sounds like a fascinating sort of story they're telling with that. Problem being, of course, that it's not quite that simple, because it's, how should I put it, strange. It's that those, like, the way they make it possible is by cheating, essentially. They basically lie to you, the player, as you're playing it, and hide obscure information from you, so it's impossible for you to actually come to the conclusion, right, yes, this is probably what's happening, which certainly is, I would say, a little bit suboptimal when it comes to trying to find out the actual truth behind something, trying to figure out exactly what's going on. But I suppose it is, at the very least, amusing, if that's a word you want to use. Is that the word I want to use? Who can say? But yeah, I'm not really sure how else to sort of like comment on that, except for that's what ends up happening. It's just a very odd situation, I would say, to find yourself in. To be like, oh, this is this is how we're going to tell a story, and it seems like it's a good setup, being like, oh yeah, this is, you're playing as main character and one of the characters you play is secretly the villain, but the fact that you had to obscure so much information for it to actually work makes me feel like probably is not actually a very doable thing probably not actually all that doable in the end for the purposes of telling the story, right? Does that make sense? It's sort of like if the only way you can do it is by essentially lying, how is it reasonable that you're going to get like any sort of trust from the player that yes, you know what you're doing when it comes to regards to the story, right? That's kind of what I mean. Is that you've basically completely lost the trust of a player if the only way that you can make the story even somewhat feasible is if you just go, oh yeah, like this, you know, what you saw ended up happening is not actually what ended up happening, and it's sort of just like, okay, that's strange. But I don't know, it just feels like it's ripe there for potential for proper storytelling. I just wish I could think of like an actual good example where it's like, oh yeah, they snapped when telling a story. The story, like, they did fantastically. And they actually nailed the sort of multiple perspective things. And because I think it's a very cool thing to see, being like, oh, you're playing the game, and then, oh, look, at some point you can see your own character doing something in a different part. Like, that sounds so engaging. Like, does that not sound like just the coolest thing to you? Maybe it doesn't, but to me it does. And I suppose that's kind of how I end up holding it in my mind, just being like, oh yeah, that sounds like a really cool concept. Why wouldn't you want something like that, you know? Something to be cool enough to be able to like show off just like a way to show how your actions have an effect maybe on the world or exactly what's going on. In a way that is distinct, in a way that's unique, in a way that you can actually tangibly, I suppose, engage with. That's what I mean to say. Of course, that's probably not exactly the easiest thing in the world, but still, it's just like, I don't know. You get what I'm saying? I'm trying to do some Shiny Colours dailies at the same time, so I'm trying to do Masterfest, and I'm just dying horribly on each of these levels. So it's really not going all that well. But that's also because I need a vocal team for this. Well, I guess I don't need a vocal team. I could do this with a visual team, maybe. Or just my regular dance team. We can try it with my regular dance team. I think I might die, though. Because the dance team doesn't seem quite strong enough. And look at these things. I mean, we can certainly give it a try to make it work out a little bit better, but it's surprisingly difficult to actually survive in what's going on here. Okay, let's try using a dance team then. I'm a very strong dance team. But yeah, I'm trying to think of good examples that have a sort of like non-linear, like multiple perspective story. I think it's just more, not so much the actual multiple perspective, which, I mean, it is what makes it interesting, but it's that sort of moment, as I say, where you have that sort of overlap where you go like, oh, from one character to another. That's cool in my mind. That's the sort of thing where I go like, that's engaging. That's like something I'm personally quite interested in. I want to see how you nail it. I want to see how you do this little sort of like back and forth revelation between what's going on in one story and what's going on in the other, you know? Because I don't think it's as easy as saying, oh, just like sort of do it. And I don't mean to suggest that is the only way you feasibly could do it. It just, you know, it's sort of like ripe for possibility there, right? Isn't it? It just seems like if you can do it, why not do it? You just have like this sort of golden opportunity of being able to show a very cool perspective or a very new perspective, or being able to show, you know, like the main character you play just sort of sitting there relaxing, not necessarily having to engage full on with a story. They can just be doing something relatively chill, you know. Like I'm trying to think, Genshin Impact kind of does this, where you play But we kind of did it in this the most recent main story quest as well, where you normally play as the main character traveler, but then you play as the side character who's basically going through her story, and at some point you can talk to the main travelers as if they were like your mentors or something. And I was like, that's a cool way to sort of like demonstrate it. That's a cool way to get like a different perspective on the character you're playing, which, I mean, from a literary technique, it kind of like makes sense, at least in my mind. It's sort of like, oh, this is a way to sort of show greater depth to your character. This is a way to illustrate something particularly unique or different perspective which you wouldn't have usually gained from them. That's at least what I think. But it's not always something which, I mean, I feel like multi-narrative perspectives is quite, I'm not sure rare is the right word, but it's not all that common in the first place. So demanding it from a story, I think, is definitely not what I mean to say. It's just sort of like, when it does happen, you gotta appreciate it. You gotta be like, yeah, that's pretty cool, lest you never see it again as a possibility. Which I think would certainly be a shame, but I don't really think that's the ultimate goal of storytelling, to be like, oh, let's rule out all variants and possibilities of what a story could be, and by allowing or disallowing one thing or another. At least I'd hope not. That's not the ultimate goal of things. Anyway, I feel like I'm sort of just talking in a circle. I'm not really saying much of any note. I'm just commenting on the fact that multi-narrative sort of perspectives, the fact that I'm trying to do, I suppose, in this D&D campaign sessions, is a very interesting challenge. One I'm certainly like trying to step up to, but it's got its own set of difficulties with it. But on that note, I'm going to round this episode off here, I think. So, if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons, and I've been Dear Darling. Likes, comments, subscription, shares, greatly appreciated. Socials, Discord down below. Hope to see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time, bye-bye for now.